Hello, and welcome to Divine Prosperity. Thank you for joining me for this transmission. This is considered a transmission of energy and consciousness. And at this point, you should already have the very first transmission. So congratulations. You may have felt it coming in, and you might not. Either way is totally fine. We will get to an opportunity to practice it together, so you should get a good sense of it. I want you to have a sense of what it feels like before moving on to the other three transmissions, which is a separate tutorial, separate transmission. I'm a basically I'm a results guy. I'm a big believer in following things that seem to work and not following things that don't seem to work. And different things work for different people. This has worked very well for me. This has worked really well for a lot of my friends and clients and so forth. So, I feel really good about putting it out there, but, maybe it doesn't work for you. So here's a chance for you to try it out, take it for a test drive. If it feels good to you, then perhaps you'll join us for the second session as well. In this session, I want to just give you a little bit of information about the principle behind Divine Prosperity and some of the history and background about where it came from and how it came to be. So let's start with that. Let's start with how Divine Prosperity came to be. Divine Prosperity came to be during my studies in something called Vortex Healing Divine Energy Therapy. This is a very powerful healing system that is actually my primary modality. This is what I have built a practice on. I feel very fortunate to have a practice that basically runs on its own steam, doing something that nobody's ever heard of before, and yet it is very powerful work, and it sustains me financially and has been very abundant in my life. And in the process of learning vortex healing, I went really deep into lack and scarcity. I was just so inspired by it and felt really called to learn it, to take as many courses as I could, even though I actually couldn't afford them. And I just sort of knew that it was my calling and everything would work out somehow. I didn't know how, but I trusted the universe, I trusted the divine to not lead me astray. And so I was taking all these courses in vortex healing, and they get really intense. They really accelerate your consciousness. They help you evolve more quickly than you might otherwise. And at one point, I felt really accelerated so far, so deeply into oneness consciousness that I got to the point where I could sort of reach out and with my awareness and feel the consciousness of things around me. And so I was just kind of playing around with this. I would connect with birds and trees and streams and rivers and animals. Anything that I could think to put my awareness into, I would connect with and just sort of get a feeling. Okay, what does that feel like? And sense the unity in the fact that I could do that, because that could only happen due to the fact that we are all in a state of oneness once you get through the illusion of all the separateness. And so I was playing with that, and at the same time feeling very deeply in lack and scarcity, because I was taking classes and spending money just in terms of living and traveling and paying for the courses, and I wasn't really earning enough, and wasn't sure how I was going to pay rent. And so one day I was just kind of reaching out to the universe with this, sort of sense of expanded consciousness, and asking, from a very deep place of yearning for some help in aligning with true abundance consciousness. As much as part of me wanted a quick fix, I actually, on a deeper level, wanted the truth. I wanted to live in a state of abundance, like what they talk about with the masters, who they just never worry about money because they're in a state of oneness and they know it's always there. And so that's where I was reaching from and what I was asking for. And almost to my surprise, actually, very much to my surprise, I felt something reach back. There was this sense of this divine consciousness that looked like just this really beautiful golden color to me, that reached back as I reached out for something like that, not knowing what I was going to encounter. And here it was, and I could commune with it, I could connect with it, and sort of try to align with it. And so that was a lovely experience, and that helped me kind of come out of that state of panic that I was in at the time. But of course, lo and behold, a few weeks later, life got very difficult financially again, and so I reached out to that consciousness again, and this time something very unexpected happened. I observed this light, this little teardrop of golden light come down from wherever this consciousness resides, and I just sort of watched it go, and it landed right in my Kundalini channel. And I had just done some work, some really amazing work on clearing out my Kundalini channel and making it, sort of free and supple and open. And then all of a sudden it felt like this overinflated balloon. There was just all this immense light, this abundant consciousness bursting from the seams from within my Kundalini channel. And so it took me some time to really integrate that and to be able to feel it without it being overly intense. And over time it sort of normalized. It became just kind of a natural background energy in my energy system. And so I would just play with it. I would activate it, and it works by intention. I would just sort of intend for it to become more active, and then feel what it did. It brought this amazing abundance consciousness into my field. And then it would bump up against places where I wasn't abundant, where my consciousness was stuck in some really, really deep place of lack or scarcity or fear. And so then I was basically forced to decide, do I want to hold on to that lack, or do I want to let it go? And every time I was presented with that choice, I would just try and let go of whatever the abundant consciousness was pushing up against. And so that became a really helpful practice. It basically highlighted places where I needed to be aware of where I was stuck in scarcity, and thereby I could release it. And so this is how it started. And I really appreciated that this was how this energy was working with me, because instead of just coming in and imposing some sort of energetic in my life to force more money to come my way, which is sort of the sense that I get from some of these abundance teachers and gurus and so forth, is they'll teach you a mantra or something that can just bring money into your life. And there's an appeal to that, of course, but I was more interested in deep transformation. I really wanted not a band-aid, not a fix, but something that would transform me from within, so that I would be more aligned with abundance. And of course the best way to do that is to come to be aware of where you're not in abundance and where you're in lack. And so that's just kind of how it worked. And this also fit with how I understand abundance. So I have a little bit of an objection to how manifesting is taught quite often. It's often taught as think good thoughts, think positive thoughts, visualize what you want, and just believe that you're going to get it. And I see people do this, and to some extent it does work. But again, it just feels like there's this, you're just sort of laying this idea or this desire on top of your reality, and eventually who you are and where your consciousness is at will catch up. It always does. Whatever your state of consciousness is, that's the state of your consciousness, and there's no getting around that. There's no circumventing it. There's only transforming it. And so the way that I viewed abundance, the way that I viewed really living an abundant life, was when you've really at a deep, deep root level let go of all the things that hold you in lack. And then your abundance becomes an expression of the abundance that you are already existing in. Not as some tricks you can do with your mind, some way to think about things or pretend to believe in a certain way or really force yourself to believe in a certain way. All that's taking like where you really are and laying on all these ideas and techniques on top of it without changing anything at a deep root level. And that's just exhausting. and it only works for so long before this kind of tires out and falls away, and then here you are again in deep lack. And so I think the best way to have an abundant life is to have an abundant consciousness. And the best way to have an abundant consciousness is to let go of all the parts of you that are stuck in scarcity and fear and lack. And that's what this energetic transmission was doing for me. So I really appreciated that. I really liked that that's the angle that it was coming from. Who knows? Like, I was just reaching out to the universe. Who knows what was going to come my way? And I just feel very blessed that what did come was something that was really in alignment with my deepest values and my deepest beliefs around how these things work. So that's the basic story. That's how it came to be. There are 3 more transmissions that came in at a later time. Again, I was in the middle of a vortex healing course. I was a bit of a vortex healing junkie, still am. And in the field, in the energy field that is created in those classes, there's a lot of divinity, and there's a lot of potentiality and acceleration and so forth. And so I was in one of these classes and just kind of really jazzed up, so I wasn't really sleeping very well. And so I was up late at night just kind of, experimenting with, consciousness and energy. And at one point I had this, again, this very clear, I don't want to use the word vision, but image, let's say, of this almost like this rod of golden light coming down and resting in my spine. And I had no idea what it was. I wasn't even at that point really working directly with the Divine Prosperity consciousness that was sitting in my Kundalini channel. I was completely focused on other things. I was more focused on what was going on in the class. And so it landed in my spine and I had no idea what it was. But when I would play with it and activate it, there was a sense of abundance, but in a different way. In the Kundalini channel, this energy has a way of, it's just pure abundant consciousness. There's no specific focus to it. It's just abundance in a very general way. And it bumps up against all the specific ways in which you're not abundant. But this felt different. There was a sense of connectedness to it, as if part of me is always questioning and wondering, like, am I going to be able to make rent? And where is the money going to come from? And where is the support going to come from? And does the universe care about me? Or all these sorts of things. And it just sort of scatters your energy. And with this transmission in the spine, it just sort of cuts through all of that and creates a sense of knowing, a sense of connection and knowing that you are connected to all of life and to source and to the source of all abundance and all of anything that you would ever need. And so it would just kind of cut down on this drama and again show me where I was in drama. So I could recognize it and sit with it and choose to let it go. And so I thought that was kind of neat, and I was very pleasantly surprised. At this point I wasn't reaching out in the same way, but apparently there was some plan in place that I had stumbled upon, and so here it was. So I had 2 transmissions now. And the next night, again, not sleeping very well, really jazzed up on the energy, meditating, and this time something came down into my heart, right into the center of my chest. And if you're familiar with the chakra system, it came into my heart chakra, and it was just this globe, this sphere of golden light, and it landed in my heart. And again, I had to kind of connect with it and experiment with it and get a sense of what it was and how it worked. And so over time I came to recognize that this was the heart aspect of abundance, that it's not just sort of this esoteric idea or this general consciousness, but there's actual heart, meaning love, meaning compassion, meaning connectedness to other beings, not just in a general prosperity way, but on a very visceral level, heart to heart, a connection there. And that is also a source of abundance and what abundance is really all about. And so with this transmission, when I would use that, it would help sort of light up that sense of connectedness and help break through the places where I was in disconnect or feeling isolated or alone or alienated. And just to serve as this reminder that actually I am in full abundance all the time, I am loved all the time, and I am love. And so there is nothing to reach for. I don't need to get love from somewhere else. I don't need to get support. I don't need to get loving support from outside of myself. It's all right here. So, so that was a really beautiful thing, and I tend to be a little bit more on the mental side of things, and so I really appreciated having something in my life and in my energy system that would really keep reminding me to go back to heart, to sit in heart and in love and compassion. Uh, so that was that night, and then the next night. There was still more. I had no idea. But what turned out to be the final transmission came in, and this one looked almost like a piece of light technology. It had, it's almost like a gizmo with almost like a camera. It had like a little aperture in the center and all sorts of little wires and antennas and doohickeys and stuff like that. And that landed in my second chakra. And again, if you're not familiar with the chakra system, that sits, they're all in the spine, and the second one is just a little bit below the navel. And while the heart chakra is sort of self-explanatory, the second chakra has to do with your relationships to, particularly, to things outside yourself. The first chakra you might think of that as your relationship to your body and to safety and hearth and home. And the third chakra would be your relationship to yourself in terms of how you feel about yourself. Your sense of power, your sense of self-worth, your sense of deservingness. But the second chakra, that has to do with your relationship to things outside of yourself. Food, money, sex, relationships to people that you care about. All of that sort of expresses through the second chakra. And so a lot of abundance systems will focus on the second chakra as a means of manifesting. You want to get that to be really strong and open and functioning in a way that you can then, from an emotional state, be open and connected, and it sort of subtly affects your radar, like what you're looking for, opportunities that might arise. That becomes more obvious when, the good ones will become more obvious when you have an open and healthy and happy second chakra. And so that's how the first thing that came to mind as far as this second chakra empowerment or transmission. And so I activated it, and it definitely worked with my second chakra, helped it to function in a more aligned way, to open up and clear blockages and so forth. But I also found that I could, I was kind of curious about this, and like I told you, there's this little aperture, almost like a camera, and I was kind of curious like what that was all about. And I came to recognize that it was something that I could put an intention into, like an image of something that I might want to manifest, or even just a pure intention, like the intention to have a full healing practice, or to travel, to have the means to do certain things, to start a family, to start a business, anything, I could put an image of what would represent that, and put that image into the what I call a manifestation device in the second chakra. And what that would do is it would start to align my entire system with that with that intention. If you think of attraction, think of magnetizing the things that you want in life, attracting it or manifesting it. There's a great analogy with magnets. A magnet is basically a piece of iron in which all of the molecules are facing the same way. Typically, in a regular, just hunk of metal, you have atoms going this way, and atoms going that way, and atoms going this way, and that way, and da 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 da. And each one has an electromagnetic field, but they're all going in random directions, and so ultimately they all cancel each other out. And so then you have a non-magnetic form of iron. But with a magnet, what happens is that all those little molecules start to line up, and then they're all facing the same direction. And each one's individual teeny tiny little electromagnetic field lines up with all the other ones. And so then you wind up having one larger field with all the little ones interconnected and facing the same direction and aligned with each other. And then that creates a magnet. And so it kind of made sense to me with this manifestation device that what it was doing was finding all the places where my intention might go in 5 or 6 or 7 different directions, either because I have a bunch of different interests or because I have certain issues that cause fears or misdirections in my intention. And it just goes and finds all those and lines them all up so that my whole system from top to bottom is aligned with one particular intention. And then that makes it much easier for reality to work with me and to manifest that. And that works both ways. I mean, first of all, you're sort of creating this field of intention, and that reaches out to the universe, and the universe responds. And then it also works in terms of, again, how you are looking at the world and the opportunities that resonate for you. If your second chakra is really closed down, there might be an opportunity to make money, but you can't see it. You're blocked off from it. Your second chakra and the energy that and consciousness that it holds you in, you're just kind of like this, and opportunities come and go, and it looks like there's no opportunities whatsoever because you're closed down there. And so with the manifestation device, first of all, it opens all of that up, and then it also helps you to see, helps you to connect with the opportunities that would help you to fulfill your intention. So that's what these different transmissions do. And you have the very first one, and so let's practice with that. Let's get a chance to really feel that and just kind of connect and commune with it and see what it feels like to you. And if it's something that really works for you, and if it does, maybe you'll be interested in the other transmissions. If not, totally fine. So, so what I'd like you to do is you can close your eyes if you want to. You don't have to, but it might help to visualize, because what you're going to do is you're going to put your awareness into your Kundalini channel. And if you're not familiar with your Kundalini channel, you can just sort of think of it as this volume of space that surrounds your spine. It's a little bit wider than the spine. It might even be wide, it could be just kind of like that, a little bit wider than the spine. If you've done a lot of really deep work with the Kundalini and opened up some of the tension that it can often hold, then it might open up to look more like that. But in any case, just kind of bring your awareness to the area around your spine, and intending to connect to the transmission, the Divine Prosperity transmission that sits in the Kundalini channel. And when your awareness is there, just ask or intend for that transmission to activate. And that's it. It's just by intention. So try that now. Bring your awareness into your Kundalini channel, and then ask or intend for the Divine Prosperity transmission that sits there to activate. And just see what that feels like. And I'll actually do it a little bit with you. You may or may not be able to sense it through the video recording, but it's a lovely field to create, so I will create it with you. We'll just practice this for a couple of minutes. And if you can feel it activating in your system, then just really drop into that feeling. If it bumps up against something, some sort of fear or contraction, then just notice that and stay with it. And when you're ready, you feel like you're in a place where you can let it go ahead and let it go. And otherwise, you might just feel this sense of spaciousness and abundance and warmth and safety. Different people feel it different ways. There's no right or wrong way to feel it. But whatever you do feel, if it feels good, you can just kind of drop into that and let that move through your entire system. Okay, so come on back. I probably didn't go too far, but that's the tutorial. I wanted you to have a sense of the history of this and where it came from and how it works, what some of the other possibilities are if you decide you want to check out the other transmissions. And again, the primary principle that I really want to convey in all of this as something for you to take away from all of this, even if we never meet again, is you create from where you are. Your consciousness is creating what it is. And if you're in a state of consciousness where, say, you're angry, you just have a lot of anger in your system, then you might notice that there's often many, many, many opportunities to get angry. And you might notice some people, look at you and like, why are you always so angry? For whatever reason, they don't feel that anger, and they don't wind up in situations where that anger gets triggered, or at least not as much. And the same goes for sadness, and for jealousy, and for survival fear, and addiction. All these things are states of consciousness that, from my perspective, you come in with. It's part of your journey as a soul that incarnates over and over again. And so you just come in with all these eons of history that in which you've accumulated a certain amount of different kinds of consciousness. And lack and scarcity is a very, very common form of consciousness. And as long as you carry the consciousness of lack and scarcity, you're going to experience lack and scarcity. And you can't get around it. And you see this a lot with people who win the lottery. In their mind, all they need is a break. Like their life is poverty, their life is, they're struggling. And if they could have just been born rich, or if they could get an inheritance, or if they could win the lottery, then everything would be better. And literally 9 times out of 10, when people win the lottery, they blow through it and they wind up just as poor as they ever were. I mean, it's a very, very common story. And the reason for it is very simple. It's that their poverty is a state of consciousness. And laying on a bunch of money on top of poverty consciousness, you're just going to wind up in poverty again. The consciousness isn't comfortable with something that it's not familiar with, especially something that it sort of gets stuck in the ego. If you're in a state of scarcity, it doesn't matter how much money somebody gives you, you're still going to feel scarcity. And you see this even with really rich people. There's I heard a guy is quoted as saying, some really rich hedge fund manager, multi-millionaire, and he at one point said, if you have anything less than $750 million, you have no hedge against inflation. And it just struck me, like, here's a guy with hundreds of millions of dollars, and he's still in scarcity and fear and lack if he can't get enough to always be ahead of inflation, which to him means $750 million, $750 million. So, this kind of scarcity consciousness can play out at every level. Even people who are very rich can, be in scarcity, and that's part of why, they might not be as generous as they might otherwise be, even though they have plenty. So, so that's what I would want to impart to you, is the importance of really transforming scarcity consciousness. not just coming up with a new system of abundance making and visualizations and storyboards and all that stuff. All those things are really helpful, but what they need to be helpful for is showing you where you are not in abundance consciousness, and then giving you the opportunity to let go of that deep state of lack. And it's not easy, it takes time. This is a system that can help with that. Vortex healing is really, really great at dissolving that kind of lack consciousness. So, find what works for you. And as you drop out of scarcity and into abundance, your life will inevitably start to follow and become your natural state of being. And life will respond to you differently. And you will respond to life differently. And that will foster a whole new relationship to money and to wealth and finances and to love and to people and to anything that you find meaningful and anything that you want more of in your life. So, so with that, I let you go. Thank you again for joining me for this free taster. And if you're interested in the other 3 transmissions, just follow the instructions in the email that you got, and I would love to help you out with taking things to the next level. Have a great one. Take care.